All right. I think we're live. I think we're ready to go. I know I am. All right. We'll get this thing popping and get your chapter 5, Colonial Society on the Eve of Revolution. Right. We'll keep it going. But before we get to all of it, right, let me put in our intro with my boy Danny. Up at UCF. Talked to him a couple times, but here he is laying down some tracks, ripping it up, shredding. All right, here you go. All right. It's probably time for me to redo that intro, make it a little bit cooler, a little bit different. If you're checking this out, you can comment on the bottom. You should be able to if you can figure out how to do that. And we can chat, right? You guys can comment, ask questions as we move through. This isn't a huge, long PowerPoint. If you are on your computer, you can pull it up. I put it on the Summer Google Classroom, so you can follow along, or I don't know why you need to do that, but you have it right here as well. So without further ado, let's make me smaller, because I don't need to be that big. There we go. Colonial Society on the Eve of Revolution. Right? So this is basically just going to go over what's going on in the colonies prior to what we started with Chapter 6. Right, so this is before the French and Indian War. This is before the Declaration of Independence. This is before all that stuff that we've been talking about in class the last week and a half, right? And we'll continue Chapter 7 tomorrow. So, but this is before that. It is prior to. If you're just joining us, say what's up. I don't know, unless you're scared. You know, I mean, I'm just going to say, hey, thanks for tuning in. I mean, if you're watching this, hey, thanks for tuning in live on a Sunday, right? Nice and cool inside. Hello! And if it's different than your actual name, right, make sure you tell me who you are. Haley, hello. How are you? Thanks for tuning in, taking time out of your Sunday. We will get through this pretty quickly, and you're like, well, then stop talking and keep going. What up, Summer? I'm very good. I am excited to get this done. Emily Shagoda in the house. What's up? How's it going? I'm very excited to get this done and go watch some Game of Thrones prior to the big world premiere tonight at 9. I know one student is very, very excited for that. You know, it's going to be good. If you're not a Game of Thrones fan, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, I don't know. You can watch it. It's a prequel. It's happened. It happens 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones, so you technically can watch it. So that's at 9 o'clock if you want to. But you might have a lot of work to do, right? Because you guys have chapters 1 through 5 due on Thursday. So. Without further ado, here you go. So if you're taking notes, remember, well, you should be taking notes because then you'd have to watch it twice. Remember, do not write everything down. Write down a lot of the things that I say on top of what is printed in the PowerPoint that you're looking at. Those are the things that are going to be more important, right? The stuff in the PowerPoint you're going to read about, you're going to put in your note cards, your chapter questions, that type of stuff. You know what I mean? It's the stuff in between, and it's the stuff that I make sure, hey, make sure you remember this, right? Okay? So, without further ado, let's go. First slide. I spent a while on this one today, making it a little bit better than last year. So, I don't know. About an hour and a half on this one, making it better. So, here, I'll click a lot of these things on here. Oh, sorry. Went too fast. Britain had 32 colonies, right? Don't need to write that down. You just need to know that only 13 of them rebelled, right? You can see it here. The population, 300,000 to 2.5 million in 1775. So when we talked about Common Sense going 120,000 copies in the first week, right? There's only 2.5 million people total in all the colonies when that thing came out. So that was a lot of people in 1775 that bought. What was I just saying? Oh, jeez. Come on. Common Sense, right? The most populated, Virginia, we've talked about that. That's number one. Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, right? That's why those three places were, remember when we were talking about people to watch in the upcoming revolution, right? Boston, Pennsylvania, Benjamin Franklin, those guys, right? And then obviously Boston, Sam Adams, John Hancock, Paul Revere. Did I say Sam Adams or John Adams? Whatever. You know what I'm saying, right? The only real cities, Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Charleston, right? Charleston because it's a port harbor. Philadelphia and New York, they're huge cities. They were then, they still are now, right? And I see a couple people joined up. If you join in, say hi, say what up. I mean, you don't have to. I'm not peer pressuring you or anything, but you should just be like, hey, what up? So that's the only thing you really need to know here is it is mostly rural, right? 90% of everything is rural. Let me get this thing better. Get this thing better situated for me. Yeah, so it's mostly rural. There we go. We're good on that one. Now, mingling of the races. These are the ones I wanted to replace these pictures because they're just kind of garbage, but whatever. Okay, the Germans, they try to keep their own language. They're trying to keep to themselves. And mostly the Germans are going to move west. They are not going to stay in the cities. They have money. They have farms. And they definitely are not loyal to the British crown, right? So they're not going to be the people that the British are looking to stay loyal in the upcoming revolution, right? And you're thinking to yourself, well, you got the Hessians that came over Germans, right? Well, a lot of those Hessians, too, after the end of the war, were just like, we're already here. Deuces. And then they're gone. You couldn't see the deuces. I put them down here. Deuces, right? And they just went out and started living with their fellow Germans. A big place for them is going to be, they're going to keep moving west, and they're going to settle in and around northern Illinois into Wisconsin area. Big German population there. Chicago, there's some, but a little bit farther even west of that and north. Okay. Ethan, what up? How's it going? Hopefully you're having a great Sunday. I'm sure this isn't what everybody wants to do on a Sunday, but we do what we got to do. We do what we got to do. They are Lutheran. Remember, with the religions, you have Catholicism and Protestantism. Okay? And everybody who is Catholic and Protestant is Christian. Now, Protestantism, that's your Lutherans, your Methodists, your Baptists, Methodist, Baptist, those type of things, right? Catholicism are just different sects of Catholicism, right? You have the Pope at the top of the Catholic Church. Protestant does not have that. They have different things, but they are both Christian, okay? And they go mostly into Pennsylvania at first, and then they're going to move farther west. But they came up with that Conestoga wagon. They're the ones that invented that. You can see that up in that top right here. That is called the Conestoga wagon. Wagon. I need some water. They were 6% of the population. All right. 5% were, you can see that. They also didn't have any loyalty to the British crown. The middle colonies, if you remember from the other lectures, 1 through 4, you should have watched already, but maybe you didn't. And the middle colonies are the most diverse. All right. The southern colonies, it's planters and African slaves. In the north, it is all mostly like New England. New England colonies, those are mostly all Puritans, very, very white area. Whereas the middle colonies were much more diverse. Okay. Too fast. Now, black slaves, you see 400,000 of them in 1775, right? So if you look up here, it was on the last slide, right? There was 2.5 million people, right? around there in 1775, you have 20% of the population is African slaves, right? So they were bringing them in large numbers, okay? And that's, you just need to understand where a lot of these cultures were coming from, and where they were located, or where they were located, right? So obviously 90% of all black slaves are in the South. They're going to be working on, I'm going to ask you the questions, and then hopefully you might know them, right? What would they be working on in Virginia and Maryland? Maybe you know. What are they working on in Virginia and Maryland? That is called the Chesapeake, and they are working mainly in tobacco, right? Tobacco. And then in the South, it's not quite, cotton has not taken over yet. That's going to be a little bit later. Sugar is still in the Caribbean. Sugar is going to be in Louisiana and stuff like that. But in the South, you're going to have in Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, you're going to have indigo, which is a dye. And then you're also going to have rice fields. All right. That's going to be the major crops there. So the ScotsIrish, okay, they were the 7% of the population. They came from Scotland, which is northern England. They were forced out of England by the English. They moved to Scotland. No, forced out of Scotland by the Irish, moved to Ireland. This is why they're called the ScotsIrish, right? They moved from Scotland to Ireland. And then they really hate British authority. They hated the Anglican Church, which was the church of Great Britain. And they mostly went to Pennsylvania, because when we talked about Pennsylvania, we talked about William Penn and how he founded Pennsylvania and how he was very, socially acceptable of different religions, different peoples, stuff like that. So a lot of people went to Pennsylvania. They were transient. They built those log cabins. When you think of a log cabin, ScotsIrish log cabins are very easily disassembled, and you can either move them, or you can build them up really quick and never tear them down. But they brought whiskey making to America, which is going to be in Pennsylvania. It's going to come up here in class here pretty soon. Once we get our independence and we get a country, there's going to be something that happens. It's a happening thing, right? I don't know why I just did that in a southern accent, but I did. But the key things here are, they were in Pennsylvania. They hated, like you can see here, resented British authority and the Anglican Church. So again, this is all setting up for the revolution, right? They are going to be very, very upset with what is going on with England, and they're not going to be the best of buddies. They're not going to give the English any breaks or anything like that. All right, moving on. Let's go. Structure of colonial society. All right, I'm going to put all these things up here. I'm not going to... Okay, here's the thing. There was more equality than in Europe, because poor people could own land, right? You can own it pretty easily because there was so much of it, and you didn't have these huge lords and stuff like that are owning vast tracts of land that are given to them by the king, to their great grandfather, you know what I mean? Things like that. But almost all of them were small farmers. We're going to be an agrarian, that's a big word, agrarian society till after the Civil War, right? Until we have this revolution, this industrial revolution, right? We're going to change from agrarian to industrial, right? Slowly. I mean, it takes a little bit, but that's when we change. And social mobility was available. What else we got here? Yeah, we weren't as bad. It says number of destitute increased, but not to European levels, right? It wasn't nearly as bad as it was in Europe, okay? It was bad here. So, you know what I mean? It's not like all roses and, meat pies, things like that. I've never had a meat pie other than like those English meat pie things. I don't know how I feel about those. What else we got here? Slaves were oppressed lower class, obviously. And the slave trade, the reason why they didn't was because of the West Indies. And you got to remember the West Indies, that's sugar, that is the most labor-intensive crop of that time period. Tobacco was very labor-intensive, not nearly as much as sugar. Because to turn, if you've never seen sugar cane, right? It's this like big, it looks like a bamboo stick. It's like thick. It's like this thick. And they have to grind it up. They have to process it to get it to the point in which you can have sugar. And you can be like, I need some sugar in my tea. And then, it tastes better. But that's, what's happening here? And if you look here, it's always, the poorest people are always usually the much larger percentage than the rich. But if you look and how it changes, 1766 to 1775, look, the poorest 30% own 1% of the wealth, right? And then the richest 10% go from 1684 to 1766, so 80 years, go from 36% to 69% of the wealth, right? That's big jumps, right? And the reason why that's there is just to show, right, whenever people get too rich in a civilization and they outpace the poor, it can get testy, right? And it can lead to revolutions. So, occupations. So agriculture is definitely, let's see what we got. No, let's leave some of these things off. Ministers, right? They're the most highly influential. We're going to talk about those when we do the Salem witch trials. And they're very influential, much more than lawyers or doctors at this time period. If you were a respected person in your city, in your family, highly esteemed, wealthy, a lot of them became ministers. It's going to quickly switch to doctors and lawyers once we create our country, but for the most part, it's mostly religious. Physicians, they don't know what they're doing. They're just like in there rooting around. What does this thing do? All right, cut that. Nope, I should not have done that. He just died. So, lesson number 1: don't cut that thingy-majig that is underneath the other thingy-majig. Right? They had no idea what they were doing. It's not until like World War I that they really have some modern medicine that you get, like, because I had a lot of practice in World War I, right? But it was even in the early 1900s, they would do surgeries and they would just like guess. They didn't know. Okay? And if you're in the medical field, this thing, it has a piece of dust on it. It's driving me crazy. If you're in the medical field, in nursing or something like that, taking some of those classes, you know what I'm talking about. All right. So, juries, lawyers were looked down upon. Agriculture was leading industry, right? Fishing was New England. Shipbuilding, that is, I think I covered that in chapter 4. But tobacco, like I said, Maryland, Virginia, middle colonies, those were the breadbasket. So, yeah, there you go. There's the different colonies. And this shows the different areas of expertise. I know it's kind of hard to see. It might be easier to see on yours. Let me see. I think I can make it bigger here. It doesn't do much. Oh, well. Okay. Doesn't matter. You can see... I don't know what the orange is. Whatever. Moving on, Mr. Green. Move it on. All right. Next one. Manufacturing. Okay. Manufacturing is very, very small. You do have lumber, timber, iron forges. Some of these people working in iron, but it's not going to be like when we think of manufacturing now. Okay. It's mostly... I just got a notification. It was like, oh, okay. Making sure it's not like you are no longer live. colonial naval stores, tar, right? Tar and feathering, right? They would make tar, and that's one of the few things that we were allowed to do because it would help the British fleets that were in the area, right? And those big colonies, New York, Pennsylvania, New England, they're the ones that are going to dominate the trade, other than Virginia and Maryland, which are going to have, that tobacco, which everybody was smoking back over in Europe. And it was the perfect ground for it, and they started making lots and lots of money. They produce rum. Rum is going to be used to buy slaves, along with money, and then along with guns that they bring in from Europe, and they're going to take those to Africa and use those to trade for slaves, which is, horrible. And yeah, that's about it. Okay, good to know on that slide. Now we get the Molasses Act. I said I found that image. Slower than molasses in winter. They didn't say that to me, coaches. When somebody would be moving all slow, and you were like, coach, man, you move slower than molasses in winter, right? So the Molasses Act was. Howdy, Bryce. How's it going, sir? How's it going? Now, Molasses Act, we talked about in class how it was in 1733, and then it gets dropped in favor of the Sugar Act. I think in 1764 is the Sugar Act. People did not like this. The sugar lobby, again, is the one that pushed for this. This is the one that's going to lead to smuggling. And remember, with smuggling, you are breaking the law, right? It's illegal. You're not allowed to do it. So then when it comes time to stop, people just keep going. And then when it comes time to have a revolution, right, you're already breaking the law. So let's just keep breaking it. Let's do something else. I don't want them to tell me what to do. But this is that there's one of those acts that was during this time period of salutary neglect, where they passed it but then didn't enforce it, right? So it's like your parents giving you a curfew and not making you stick to it, right? So then you just go, whatever, right? And then when they do finally turn it on, then you're like, man, what in the hell? Yeah, it's like, no, don't do it. I thought I had a picture on here. There it is, of what molasses looks like. It looks almost like oil, right? But it's just like a dark, sugary substance. You put it in some cookies, like some, what cookies they put them in a lot? I don't know. Ginger cookies, dark cookies, right? Because you can't put it in. It's going to turn it dark. And now I want some cookies. Oh, well. I don't think I have any here. Oh, well. Okay. Oh, yeah, hit the like button, guys, just because, I want more than 2. I don't care. It was funny last year, like, when we would do it, like, there was a couple students who were, like, all the time, be like, hit the like button. And I was like, it doesn't really matter, you know what I mean? Like, I don't care. I really don't. It doesn't matter. All right, car break. This just came out, the GT3 RS, and if you're into cars, you know what this thing is. If you don't, this thing is a rocket ship on the racetrack. It's not like crazy horsepower. It's like 518 horsepower, but the innovations that move the aero around the car, the air, are pretty spectacular. I'm not going to bore you guys with all of that. That's for the car club, but you can see how they have these cutaways. And that's to extract air out of and around the wheels. Same thing here. And there's all kinds of stuff with in the back of the car. With the new wing, it has this drag reduction system. You see that little gap, makes it goes faster, and that thing moves back and forth, this top element here. But there's all kinds of stuff. But it's just a crazy cool looking car. So there's your little car brake, right? Those wheels are sick. They have like all these holes in them. They're light. They're so light. They're 21s in the rear. But yeah, GT3 RS just got released. If you're into it, Top Gear does a really good breakdown on YouTube. So if you're listening and are like, dang, the car's sick. It is. I would love to drive that thing. All right. Dominant denominations. All right. So there were churches there were the Congregationalists and the Anglican. Those are going to be the big one. Anglican Church is the English church. Remember, King Henry created it because he wanted a divorce. But it's very, it's a king's church, right? So that's why it was the authority of the king, which was King George III at this point, obviously. Well, it will be in a little bit. But people in America, especially in the New England region, were like, hey, this isn't Puritan enough. You're talking about dancing and listening to music and all those crazy things that get the devil started, right? Because that's what they believe, and that's how that's how you get to the Salem witch trials in the 1690s. So they didn't like the king having too much power, which is why they didn't want like some kind of bishop over here or somebody like that, because they were like, oh, he would have more power. The Anglican Church of Philadelphia, I put a photo of it there. And the Anglicans, okay, that is probably the most important thing here. You don't need to know which places they were the highest number, the Anglicans, but you need to know that the Congregationalists and the Presbyterians supported revolutionary ideas, where the Anglicans supported the king. So as we get closer to the revolution, right, you're going to have, think of the Presbyterians and the people, or just think of the Anglicans as the only ones that supported the king and supported keeping the colonies English, right, or anti-revolutionary. I guess that's probably the easiest way to think about it, is that the Anglicans are doing that. How much time are we on now? 32 minutes. Okay. Shouldn't be too much more. Here, Jonathan. Okay, the big thing on this one, Jonathan Edwards, that guy with the awesome neck. I don't know. It almost looks like the Twin Towers underneath his neck. It's just an interesting outfit. Sinners in the Hands of the Angry God. This guy, it was a preaching style that is called fire and brimstone. It's like, if you don't believe in what's happening, if you don't, believe in God in the way that we're telling you to live your life this way, you are going to, you're going to hell. You are going, and so it's a very intense style of preaching, and it was really, like I put in quotation marks, fright persons from hell. So to frighten people enough to live the life that the church wanted you to live, or you would go to hell. So that's what Jonathan Edwards, he became pretty synonymous with the time period, and you really just need to know who he is. And that's pretty much that on that screen. Yeah. All right. Next one. The Great Awakening. George Whitefield. All right. This guy. You have to understand what this is. You have to know what the Great Awakening is. 1730s and touchdown. That's what I spent some time today doing, like adding stuff like that. He was very charismatic from everything that I've ever read on him. He was a very good speaker. And he wanted people of this Great Awakening. They're called the New Lights. And so you might want to, remember that part, but know when it is, because there's going to be a second Great Awakening, right? So you need to understand where the first one is and the second one is. So this is 1730s to 40s. So it's like a 10-year time span. And a lot of these people split over their support of this. You don't really need to know that. But again, the effects are what College Board loves you to know. The first spontaneous mass movement of Americans, right? They start, huge numbers show up for his sermons. All right. Oh, hold on. Yeah. So, you have other revival gatherings and stuff like that. But the biggest thing here is the Great Awakening and how, it's just the awakening of religion in much of America. and it was hugely successful, followed by hundreds of thousands of people on a weekly basis. So just make sure you understand what it is and the big effect that it had on the country. All right. All right. Moving right along. Hopefully we'll get out of here pretty soon. Shouldn't be too much longer. We have education in the colonies. All right. Well, I should have made these bigger, right? Traditional education limited to elite aristocrats in England. It's not really for citizenship. You really had to read the Bible, which was a very good thing because it upped the literacy in the very religious areas because you had to be able to read the Bible, right? So that is a very good part of a lot of the colonies being very, very religious. And Johnny Mills, stop drawing that filth on my board. Dancing stick figures has no place in society, right? Because they're uptight, right? I can't hear your laughs, so I'm assuming everybody is dying laughing at that joke. So, I mean, that's what I'm assuming. That's what I'm thinking is happening right now. You guys are just like falling out of your chair, like, that Mr. Green, he's the best. He's so funny. No, I'm just joking. I was just like on a roll today, trying to put all these words on some of these things. You'll see there's some better ones. Boys are definitely given more formal education. They're allowed to go to school, go to college, and depending on where you lived, really depended on if you had a school. If you're in the South, no schools. People that were way too far apart. But in the smaller cities in the Northeast, where everybody is right on top of each other, you could have schools where you could have a teacher because it was very easy to get there, and you could have a smaller school. So this is the memorial of you can see on the bottom here, memorial of first public school in U.S., Latin school, Boston. So it was a Latin school to teach you Latin in Boston. First public school in the United States, right? Which you guys are all at and you all love, right? Yeah. And schools limited by the needs of the farm, which is why you guys are off in the summer, because that's when they needed to harvest. So the kids had to do all the harvesting. So that's why you're off in the summer. That's the only reason. No other reason. So, I mean, down here in Florida, being off in the summer, I'd rather be off, December, January. It'd be better down here. How awesome would that be? Okay, that's it. I think we're good on that one. American universities. Most universities, they're there to train those new light people. They are religious. Maybe some lawyers, definitely not doctors, right? Doctors are on the low level. It's preachers, then lawyers, and as far as hierarchy. If you wanted some other kind of training, you would go to Europe. You wouldn't stay here. Remember, but this is in 1600s into the low 1700s. All right. Harvard was the first, right? So that's how Harvard has their, panache that they have now, right? They're old in the United States by a long shot, 1636, right? Then you have William and Mary. A lot of these colleges, right? Penn, you guys should know. Yale, obviously. Columbia, Princeton, Brown, Dartmouth, Rutgers. And then I found this picture of college. I just looked up college on Google, and it came up with this dumb image of these people walking. I don't know. I hate just pictures like that. So I was like, I even put some words with them. It's like, what's so funny, Sharon? And then she's laughing, and she's like, ha, Mia is cheating on you. And then Todd is like, with me. And then Mia's like, LOL, you guys. And then she's side looking at him like, what is going on? Shut up. I don't know. Just put something with them. Again, I'm assuming you guys are all dying laughing at that joke. So, I mean, And I'm just assuming it. So hopefully you are. I don't know. Maybe you're not. Moving on. I know. Provincial culture. There are no schools in this area in this country to train any type of artist. You had to go back to Europe. That's where all the training was. But you had some very substantial painters, John Trumbull, John Singleton Copley. Those are ones you might have heard of before. And then Phyllis Wheatley, who was a former slave girl who taught herself how to read, which you can't learn how to read. You're not allowed to be taught. It's illegal. And then she goes on to become a poet, a very, very well-respected poet even to this day. She gets published. It's very, very famous for this, especially if you're taking, I don't know if it's going to be I don't know what English class you guys take. Is it English Lit? Is it literature? Or is it, I don't know what it is, what your AP classes are. But I wonder if you guys study her. Not sure. Then we get Benjamin Franklin, this guy, right? He was everything. Businessman, philosopher, inventor, scientist, all kinds of stuff. He wrote this Poor Richard's Almanac, which was a lot of different things, but you don't really need to understand that. But here's the thing. Benjamin Franklin, like when we talked about leading up to, what was that, after the Sugar Act, and he's like, listen, you guys need to settle down here on the taxes. You're going to have a rebellion, right? That's why he was there, because people admired him over there, and they admired him here enough to send him there to kind of be an advisor, right? And I'll tell some more about Benjamin Franklin's story in class, because it's more fun. But he was kind of like a TMZ. He was like a blogger, and he had some tea on people, and he wrote it under a pseudonym, and it was some juicy stuff. But we'll talk about that in class. A little bit more fun in class. Then we get the pioneer presses, right? Benjamin Franklin did have a big, huge library. So did Thomas Jefferson. This is what a printing press looked like during this time period. And he had his own paper, the Pennsylvania Gazette. You can see it there. And I'll show you guys this week when we talk about the Declaration of Independence and what it looks like, right? The Pennsylvania Gazette, I got a printing of it with the first ever printing of the Declaration of Independence. Pretty cool. But a lot of these people during the Revolution, they wrote under pseudonyms. They wrote under different names, so they couldn't be persecuted or held responsible for what they wrote. But we talked about it, right? We had the committees of correspondence because these papers couldn't just write anything they wanted. They were critical of the British, but not like real critical, because they knew. They knew if they were too critical, it would be bad news. All right. What else we got here? Zinger Trial. All right. John Peter Zinger. We talked about the New York governor before, because the New York governor disbanded the New York Assembly because they weren't paying because they're the ones that held the purse strings, and they weren't paying for the housing of troops and the feeding of troops and stuff like that. And so he was criticizing the governor, and they arrested him, right? Well, the things that he was publishing were true. So this is a very important case. I think I have a little thing that pops up. Make sure you remember this. The Zinger Trial, you have to remember. We will reference it multiple times. And this is when, I put at the bottom, allowed Americans to criticize the government, right? And that truth is the defense against libel, right? If you say something about somebody in a newspaper and something like that, it can, you can be sued for libel, right? The biggest case of the summer was Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, right? He sued her for libel because she said some things about him, and that cost him a lot of money, and that's called libel. And then she was found guilty of it, and sent the money. I don't know the whole things about that case, but that was a libel case, right? And this is the first one. in America. And the jury returned a verdict of him not guilty, even though they were told to make him guilty. So it was a big deal. And it says Andrew Hamilton. I don't know why I put that, but because that's not has anything to do with anything. But don't worry about that part. Now we got. I should be good on that. Zinger won the case. Okay, yeah, I forgot. Precedent of free press in America, right? I told you that that word precedent is big, and we will use it multiple times. Precedent is very, very big in this case. It sets this free press that we're going to have, right? First Amendment, the precedent of that. Yeah, there we go. Structure of colonial government. How far in are we? We're almost done. So, I mean, you can start here. Just give yourself a bunch of room, and then that way you could take notes before this. But as soon as this gets done, we will. You can watch it on my YouTube channel. So you should be good. All right. Structure of the colonial government. What you need to know here is just how it's structured, right? If you have a British governor, you have a royal governor, you have the council, and that's the upper house, and then the colonial assembly. And you see here, we talked about it, how I said we hadn't talked about it, how they could pay the governor's salary. And that's how they could control them, because they could limit their pay. All right. But they were representative, meaning they represented a group of people, and they were voted in by landowners. And then the last slide is going to talk about the voting and stuff like that. The governor had the most authority. You just need the general overall structure of this very easily, very similar to our current government structure. All right. What else we got? We'll leave that on for you. I get talking, really quickly because there's not a lot of talk back. You guys aren't talking back. I'm just messing with you. You don't have to. Let you guys get this for a second. All right. What else do we need? Remember, if you're not watching this live, you can always pause it and then write what you need down. Okay. Moving on. Last slide. Colonial politics. Look at these people. They had town meetings. They had very good political debate. If you wanted to vote, you needed to own land. For most, it wasn't at first, but then as they got a little full of themselves. Towards the end, that was a big thing, that you had to own land in order to vote. All right, and all of them had limitations on voting. Women, children, Indians, African Americans, no voting, not involved in the political process. Right. So obviously, the minority of people are deciding what the majority of people are doing, or what everybody's doing, right? Because white male landowners are definitely a minority, right? But they just held all the power at that point. Some white males were excluded, obviously, if you didn't own land, things like that. And they had power, especially going through the 18th century. And because they had the power of the purse strings, right? They had the power of the purse. They had the power to pay people. Those assemblies did. And their power got more and more as they went through, because they could pay people. They could not pay people, which gives you a lot of power. All right. And so, like I put, self-government became a habit, but was quickly becoming a right. Right. This is going to be very, very important in the lead up for the revolution, right? Which we are currently in the midst of right now. So that's all I got. That's 19, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Okay. I'll go back. And yeah, that's it. So, take notes. If you, you should already take notes because you're at the end of the thing. So I don't even need to tell you that. I said it at the beginning. So that's all I got. You guys have a great rest of your Sunday. I'm going to go watch some Game of Thrones and make some lunch because I didn't eat lunch today. Yeah, that's all I got for you guys. Have a great day, everybody, and we will see you tomorrow. Peace. I gotta end the stream. There we go. Thank you all for who came in live. I forgot to thank you guys for the ones who came in live and listened. Thanks for joining me in this beautiful adventure we called YouTube for a push. I don't know. That's all I got. Yeah, okay. See you guys later. See you tomorrow. Bye.